They came without warning, their boots striking the dust of the colony square as if the ground itself should bow before them. The insignia of the Empire gleamed on their armor, polished metal reflecting the dull sun, a sharp contrast to the starving crowd that had gathered out of fear, not respect. Orders had been barked, and within moments the square was filled with silence. Everyone knew what happened when soldiers arrived in numbers like this. Someone was about to be made into an example. At the edge of the crowd stood a girl, barely more than 16, her thin frame wrapped in clothes mended too many times. Her hands clutched a bundle of food, bread smuggled from the Empire's own stores, meant for children who had not tasted a full meal in weeks. She had been caught before she could deliver it. Now, dragged forward by 2 armored soldiers, she stumbled into the center of the square. The bundle was torn from her hands, cast into the dirt, trampled beneath a heavy boot. The officer in command stepped forward, his voice amplified through the speakers in his mask. He accused her of rebellion, of stealing from the Empire, of conspiring to weaken their control. The crowd remained still, faces lowered. No one dared to speak. They all knew the charge was meaningless. Mercy had never been in the Empire's dictionary. Punishment was not about guilt, it was about obedience. The girl raised her head. Her eyes, dark and unflinching, locked onto the officer's visor. She did not beg, nor did she cry. Her silence cut deeper than any words could. It was defiance, quiet yet undeniable. She had chosen to act when others stayed paralyzed. In that moment, she became a threat, not because of what she had done, but because of what she represented. The order was given. A rifle was raised. The sound of the first shot shattered the square, echoing off stone and steel. The impact drove her back a step, but she did not fall. A second followed, tearing through her frail body. Still she remained standing, her gaze unbroken. The soldiers fired again, and again, until 7 shots had found their mark. Only then did her knees buckle, her body collapsing to the ground in silence. The bread lay beside her in the dirt, stained and ruined. For a moment, no one moved. The Empire officer turned to the crowd, declaring the fate of all who disobeyed. He demanded submission, obedience, and silence. His voice was filled with triumph, but the silence he received in return was not the silence of fear. It was something colder, sharper. It was the silence of people watching, remembering. 2 villagers stepped forward to lift her body. They did so carefully, as though she were not broken, as though she were not gone. They carried her with reverence, their steps slow, deliberate, and unchallenged. The soldiers allowed it, believing they had already won. They thought terror had been planted. They thought the lesson had been delivered. But in the eyes of the crowd, something had shifted. The soldiers mistook lowered heads for submission, not realizing that grief has a way of transforming into something far more dangerous. The girl's death was not a warning. It was a spark. The Empire patrol left the square confident in their cruelty, satisfied with the message they believed they had carved into the hearts of the conquered. They could not sense the undercurrent moving through the people, the quiet exchange of looks, the unspoken vow forming in silence. The girl had died with her eyes open. She had not begged, she had not wept, and that refusal would not be forgotten. Her name, once whispered in small corners, was now etched into the minds of all who had witnessed the brutality. In that moment, she became more than herself. She became a symbol. The sun dipped lower, shadows stretching across the square where her blood had dried. Children clutched their parents, not in fear of the soldiers, but in awe of what they had seen, a girl stand unbroken until her last breath. Stories spread quickly in whispers carried on the wind, moving from home to home, from one trembling mouth to another. No one said the words aloud, but all thought the same thing: she had not died alone. For the first time in years, the people did not feel crushed beneath the heel of the Empire. They felt a pulse. A reminder that even the smallest act of defiance could ignite something greater. The girl's fall had not ended her fight, it had only begun it. And though the soldiers believed the matter settled, the ground beneath their boots had already started to shift. 9 hours still remained before the galaxy would understand what her death had truly awakened. The hours that followed stretched longer than any day the colony had endured. The Empire's soldiers returned to their barracks, convinced their display of dominance had crushed any thought of defiance. But beneath the surface, in the homes where lights were dim and voices hushed, the silence thickened into something they could not read. It was not submission. It was waiting. 9 hours is not much in the scale of empires, but to those who lived them, each tick of time carried weight. In the first hour, families gathered around fires, whispering the girl's name. Some prayed. Others sharpened makeshift blades with trembling hands. Children asked why she had not begged, and mothers answered with words they had never dared speak aloud, because she was braver than the ones who killed her. By the third hour, rumors began to stir. Old stories, half forgotten, found new breath. They spoke of the ghost of Earth, a figure woven into the oral history of scattered colonies. Some said it was a warship, ancient and undying, drifting across the void to answer the call of the oppressed. Others swore it was no machine but a shadow of humanity itself, a guardian that struck only when blood had been unjustly spilled. Most dismissed it as legend, a bedtime story for children. Yet now, in the stillness that followed her death, the legend resurfaced with urgency. The Empire noticed, though they laughed at it. Officers mocked the whispers, calling them the feeble hopes of broken people. In their arrogance, they dismissed what they did not understand. Patrols were reduced. Soldiers bragged in the mess halls that the girl's blood had bought them an easy night. They thought themselves untouchable. But as the 5th hour crept past, things began to falter. A drone sent to survey the perimeter failed to return. Communication static disrupted long-range channels. Power flickered in the garrison walls, just for a moment, enough to be noticed but not enough to cause alarm. The commander attributed it to faulty infrastructure and ordered technicians to ignore the chatter of locals who claimed it was a sign. He never saw how his men's confidence had begun to erode. The 6th hour was colder. Soldiers found themselves uneasy, watching shadows as though something pressed against the colony from beyond the horizon. The wind carried no sound but seemed heavy, charged. The humans, though outwardly quiet, moved with a different rhythm. Their silence was not fear, it was expectation. The name of the girl passed from one mouth to another like a vow, and with it, the myth of the ghost grew stronger. By the 7th hour, unease spread through the garrison. Reports of lights in the sky came from farmers beyond the settlement, strange pulses that vanished when investigated. Officers ordered silence, afraid the stories would spread too far, yet the stories had already slipped beyond their control. Every failure of equipment, every unexplained flicker, was claimed by the people as proof that something was coming. The ghost was awake. The 8th hour broke what little calm remained. Entire patrol squads lost contact. Their signals vanished mid-transmission, their last words fragments of confusion. The commander, frustrated, demanded a full report, but his officers could provide nothing. Screens showed only blank feeds where soldiers had once marched. He ordered reinforcements from orbit, yet the call returned nothing but static. The Empire prided itself on control, but now, control was slipping through their hands like sand. And still the people waited. Their windows glowed faintly, their eyes lifted not in dread but in anticipation. They did not know what form the ghost would take, nor whether it was flesh, machine, or something in between. But they believed. And belief, once kindled, is a force more dangerous than weapons. When the 9th hour approached, the air itself seemed to still. Time moved with the sharpness of a blade. The commander stood on the platform overlooking the square, the same place where the girl had fallen, and felt for the first time a sliver of doubt. He looked out over the colony, expecting submission, yet saw only eyes watching him in silence. He had thought them cowed. Now he recognized it for what it was, waiting. And then the alarms began to scream. The alarms tore through the night, shrill and unrelenting, echoing off the colony walls like 1,000 voices warning of something far greater than a simple malfunction. Soldiers scrambled from their bunks, rifles clutched tight, shouting to one another, confusion spreading faster than orders. No drills had ever prepared them for this, because nothing in the manuals of the Empire had ever accounted for fear of the unseen. The sky above the colony was no longer empty. At first it appeared as a shimmer, a distortion in the stars, like heat rising from stone. Then, as if the void itself were peeling open, the shape emerged, vast, black, and scarred. An ancient warship drifted into view, its surface bearing the marks of battles long past, its presence alone pressing on the lungs of all who looked at it. It was not a ship meant to inspire pride, but dread. Its silence was heavier than cannon fire. The commander demanded an identification. His officers stammered, hands moving across consoles, but the data returned nothing. No registry, no record, no broadcast. The vessel's systems resisted every scan, every probe, as though it were cloaked in shadows no technology could pierce. Frustration turned to unease when one of the younger officers whispered what no one wanted to hear. "It's human!" The words spread like contagion. Human. Impossible, they told themselves. The Empire had crushed Earth, scattered its fleets, broken its armies. Humanity had no warships left, only transports and rusting relics. Yet there it was, hanging above them, undeniable. The soldiers who had laughed at stories of the ghost now found their mouths dry, their bravado withering in the weight of what loomed above. Without warning, the warship spoke. Not in words, but in sound. A pulse rolled through the calm channels, a steady, deliberate rhythm. Thump. 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 It was the sound of a heartbeat, magnified, slowed, impossible to mistake. Those who had been present in the square knew it immediately. It was the girl's heartbeat, replayed, each thump striking like a drum of judgment. Panic cracked through the ranks. Soldiers shouted, asking what it meant, but the answer lay heavy on every mind: she was not forgotten. The warship was her voice, her vengeance. Each beat mocked the Empire's certainty, reminding them that life, even stolen, leaves an echo. The commander ordered fire. Ground batteries rotated upward, energy surging, missiles locked on. But before a single shot could leave the surface, the ghost moved. Not with blinding speed or reckless fury, but with precision born of experience. A single lance of light split the sky, cutting clean through the first battery, silencing it in a flash. Then another. And another. Not a wasted round, not a missed strike. Within minutes, the defenses meant to protect the colony had been peeled apart like brittle glass. The ship did not rain destruction indiscriminately. It chose targets with surgical clarity. Patrol ships in orbit vanished one by one, each reduced to burning fragments before alarms could even register their loss. Soldiers on the ground tried to regroup, but their comms filled with static, their chains of command collapsing under interference they could not counter. And in the shadows of the colony streets, the humans rose. Until that night, they had been farmers, miners, laborers pressed into silence. But now, with the ghost above them, they became something else. Knives scraped free, makeshift explosives hidden for years were pulled from beneath floorboards, and courage surged where fear had long lived. They struck at patrols, ambushing with precision born of desperation and timing. For every shot the ghost fired above, a blade or bullet found its mark below. The Empire had always believed rebellion would be crushed before it began, that humans lacked the will to rise. But this was no rebellion. This was retribution. The warship was not only destroying their military strength, it was reshaping the will of an entire people. The commander shouted into the calm, demanding parley, threatening consequences. His words vanished into static. The only answer came again, steady and relentless: thump. Thump. A reminder that what they had taken with 7 bullets was being returned, pulse by pulse, with interest. The 9th hour had ended. The ghost had arrived, and nothing in the galaxy could pretend it was myth any longer. The comms cracked alive with a voice not born of flesh, but distorted through layers of steel and shadow. Cold, deliberate, unyielding, it carried across every frequency at once. "You shot her 7 times. I will return 7-fold for each wound." The words struck harder than any bombardment, leaving silence in their wake. Soldiers froze where they stood, officers stared at dead screens, and the commander's throat tightened. It was not a negotiation. It was a verdict. The first detonation came without warning. The Eastern Fuel Depot, a stockpile feeding the Empire's engines, vanished in fire, the ground trembling with the force of it. The second followed moments later, tearing through the barracks, shredding steel and bone alike. Each explosion echoed the voice's promise. 2 wounds answered. 5 remained. Terror spread like wildfire. The once disciplined soldiers scrambled in chaos, some firing blindly at the sky, others breaking rank and fleeing into the streets where civilians watched them scatter like prey. The people did not lift a hand to stop them. They only observed, eyes cold, as the mighty garrison that had ruled them for years collapsed into disorder. Above, the Ghost maneuvered with a precision no Empire vessel could match. It did not unleash overwhelming barrages, nor attempt to level the colony. It struck with intent. Communications towers crumbled, weapon emplacements burned, transport craft were reduced to twisted wrecks. Each strike answered another bullet. Each strike reminded the Empire what had been promised. On the ground, the humans pressed forward. They moved in silence, coordinated as if guided by the same pulse echoing through the skies. Resistance fighters, long hidden, revealed caches of arms kept secret for generations. Farmers became snipers. Miners wielded explosives with deadly skill. Every alley turned into a trap, every corridor a grave. The Ghost's presence above gave them not just courage but unity. They were no longer survivors. They were executioners. The commander tried to rally his men, his voice breaking through trembling orders. He claimed reinforcements would arrive, that the Empire's fleet would crush the intruder. But his lies cracked as easily as the glass in his command tower when the Ghost spoke again. 3. A third detonation ripped through the orbital docks, reducing reinforcements to ashes before they could launch. The commander fell silent, his officers staring at him with hollow eyes, knowing no help was coming. Panic fed upon itself. Soldiers abandoned posts, throwing down weapons in desperate flight. But escape offered no mercy. Civilians dragged the fallen rifles from the dirt, arming themselves with the very tools of their oppressors. For every soldier that ran, another ambush waited. For every shot the Empire fired, 5 more answered. The Ghost made no demand for surrender. It did not negotiate terms, did not ask for treaties. It existed only to repay what had been taken. Every act was a ledger, every strike a line written in fire. The girl's death was no longer a tragedy. It was a currency, and the Empire was bankrupt. By the time the 6th explosion lit the night, consuming the command center in a storm of flame, the colony had become unrecognizable. The garrison that had once stood untouchable now lay in ruin. The civilians, once bowed, now stood tall, weapons in hand, their voices raised not in fear but in fierce defiance. The girl's name echoed through the streets, not as mourning, but as a rallying cry. The commander, wounded and crawling from the wreckage, looked up at the sky, broken pride etched into his bloodied face. His empire had promised eternal rule, dominance without question. Yet here, on a forgotten world, it was unraveling before his eyes. He whispered that the Ghost was only a ship, that it could be destroyed, that legends held no power. But even as he said it, he knew it was a lie. Legends do not die. Legends consume those who create them. The voice returned one final time, colder than before. 7. The last strike fell upon the orbital relay, the heart of Empire control in the sector. With its destruction, every surrounding world heard the silence left behind, a silence that screamed louder than words. Humanity remembers. When dawn broke, nothing of the Empire remained. The smoke of the last detonation still clung to the air when silence descended upon the colony. Not the silence of fear, but of finality. The Empire was gone. Its banners, once draped over walls like shackles, lay trampled in ash. Where soldiers had marched, only rubble and blood remained. The people did not cheer. They stood among the ruins, breathing in the air of freedom for the first time in their lives, struggling to comprehend that the nightmare had ended. Above them, the warship lingered in orbit, black against the pale morning sky. It made no proclamation of victory, no demand for loyalty. Its very existence was enough. Survivors whispered to one another, wondering if it carried living crew or if it was a machine, ancient and patient, awakened only when called. None dared speak too loudly, as though naming it might break the spell. The girl's name, however, spread without restraint. It passed from mouth to mouth until the entire colony spoke it in unison, not with grief but with pride. She was no longer a victim. She was the seed from which their freedom had grown. Every bullet fired into her body had become fire raining back upon her killers. Her defiance had transcended death, woven now into the marrow of every human who had watched her fall. The Empire tried, in the days that followed, to rewrite the event. They broadcast denials, branding the warship a fabrication, a staged illusion crafted by rebels. Yet the truth had already escaped them. Merchant vessels carried the tale to neighboring systems. Refugees who had fled returned with stories sharper than blades. Entire sectors whispered of the ghost, of the colony liberated in a single night, of vengeance that answered cruelty with unflinching precision. The legend spread faster than Empire patrols could silence it. On worlds where humans still bent under the whip, they lifted their heads with something dangerous in their eyes. On planets where other species cowered under the same banners, they too whispered, if Earth remembers its own, then perhaps they might not be forgotten either. Fear, once a weapon belonging solely to the Empire, began to work against it. What terrified the commanders most was not the destruction itself, but the message etched into every survivor's memory. The ghost had spoken only once, its words simple, unforgettable. For every wound sevenfold. It was not merely a threat. It was a principle, a law older than the Empire itself. Every human life taken unjustly would carry a debt, and the debt would always come due. The colony buried their dead quietly. They placed the girl at the highest point overlooking the settlement, her grave marked not with stone but with the rifles of the fallen soldiers who had killed her. Around her rested offerings of bread, small tokens of what she had once carried. No one wept as they laid her down. They stood in silence, knowing her spirit had not been lost but had taken form in the sky above them. When the last rites were done, the people looked up once more. The ghost had begun to move, drifting slowly from orbit. No thrusters flared, no sound marked its departure. It simply slid into the void, its dark hull vanishing into the black as though swallowed by the stars. Its silence was louder than any farewell. Then came its final broadcast, a signal carried on every frequency, every channel, across every listening world within range. The voice was colder than before, stripped of all but certainty. For every human life you steal, the cost will be eternity. Remember the girl. The signal cut off. The stars closed behind the ghost, leaving only rumor and terror in its wake. Yet the message endured. It could not be censored, could not be erased, because it did not live in transmissions alone. It lived in memory, in the eyes of every survivor, in the whispers that traveled faster than fleets. The Empire, vast as it was, could not escape a truth it had tried to bury. Humanity had not vanished. Humanity had not forgotten. And humanity would not forgive. From that day forward, no soldier in the galaxy looked upon a human child without remembering the girl who stood silent before the rifles. No commander slept easily knowing that somewhere in the dark, unseen, the ghost might already be watching. Generations would pass, and still the warning would echo. They thought they had killed her. Instead, they had awakened something that would haunt them forever.